Has anyone ever heard of the Panama Canal? Huh? It was solely for Panama to manage and not for China or any other country to manage. You see what's going on there? China. And we will never, ever let it fall into the wrong hands.
You just watched is a summary of what happened during the last 10 days of December, where Trump opened the door to a new and terrifying battle. This time, however, the battle isn't with his so-called traditional enemies. As you saw, it's a battle with Panama, a bid to control the Panama Canal, one of the most crucial waterways in the world. In short, Trump is threatening that the United States will seize control of the canal.
He just said, take it back. That's a good idea.
Of course, Trump's statements didn't sit well with Panamanian officials. In response to these veiled threats, Panamanian President José Raúl Mulino addressed the matter directly. He released a video that went viral on social media, in which he declared, "Every square meter of the canal belongs to Panama and will always belong to Panama."
Que cada metro cuadrado del Canal de Panamá y su zona adyacente es de Panamá.
Trump then posted an image of the American flag planted in the canal area with the caption, "Welcome to the United States Canal." On December 25th, he shared another post saying, "Merry Christmas to everyone, including the wonderful soldiers from China who lovingly, but illegally, operate the Panama Canal." Afterward, he announced an executive action, signaling that he was serious about his ambitions for the canal and was steadfast in his threats. So, what did he do? He appointed Kevin Marino Cabrera as the U.S. ambassador to Panama, describing him as a fierce advocate for the America First principle who will do an excellent job representing American interests in Panama. For those unfamiliar, Kevin Cabrera is a nationalist with unwavering loyalty to Trump, fluent in Spanish, and after his appointment, he said something worth noting. Cabrera pledged his commitment to advancing Trump's America First vision and vowed to work tirelessly every day to uphold the president's bold approach to international diplomacy. Trump's remarks, declarations, and threats ignited a storm in Panama, not just among its political leaders, but also its people, and even in the broader region. This led to a wave of solidarity with Panama, from Mexico to Chile to Colombia. Nations rallied in defense of Panamanian sovereignty, declaring that the Panama Canal belongs solely to Panama and vowing to defend its sovereignty to the very end. These events and more raise some critical questions. Why does Trump want to seize the Panama Canal? What makes it so important? Could he actually do it? What's China's role in all this? How does Panama plan to respond to these U.S. threats? And finally, could the Suez Canal benefit from this brewing conflict? These are just some of the pressing and dangerous questions we'll try to answer in today's episode. Let's dive in. Before delving into Trump's ambitions regarding the Panama Canal, the reasons behind them, and China's involvement, we need to take a step back in time to understand the canal's origin story. This background provides critical insight into the current situation. The dream of cutting a canal through the isthmus at its narrowest point to connect the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans in Panama has always been shared by many. The first attempt was made by the Spanish, who colonized Panama for 300 years, but their efforts ended in failure. It wasn't until Panama declared independence from Spain and chose to join Gran Colombia in a bid for regional integration to promote development that things progressed. In 1878, Colombia signed a concession agreement with French engineers, led by Ferdinand de Lesseps, the mastermind behind Egypt's Suez Canal, to excavate the Panama Canal. However, the French efforts also ended in failure. After 9 years of trying to construct the canal, the French declared bankruptcy. At the time, malaria, yellow fever, and tropical diseases were claiming the lives of the workers. They also faced hazardous terrain and harsh working conditions in the jungles, ultimately leading to over 20,000 deaths and the failure of the project. Seizing the opportunity, the United States, which had a pressing need to build the canal for economic, political, and military purposes, negotiated a treaty in 1901 granting them the license to construct the canal. However, Colombia, considering Panama a part of its territory, refused to ratify the treaty. In response, U.S. President Theodore Roosevelt dispatched American warships to blockade Panama's coasts on both the Atlantic and Pacific sides to support Panama's independence from Colombia and ensure the canal's construction. The dense jungles prevented Colombian forces from resisting the Americans, and Panama declared its independence from Colombia on November 3, 1903. 3 days later, Panama's ambassador to Washington, Felipe Bunau Varela, signed a treaty granting the United States indefinite rights to build and operate the canal. This led to protests from Panamanians, who later questioned the treaty due to allegations of corruption involving Felipe and the Americans, as well as the treaty's neglect of Panama's interests. The United States began constructing the Panama Canal in 1904, employing workers from Panama and the Caribbean. Unfortunately, over 5,000 of these workers lost their lives before the canal was finally inaugurated in 1914. The construction cost approximately $375 million, making it the most expensive building project in U.S. history at the time. The opening of the Panama Canal revolutionized global shipping, allowing thousands of American commercial and military ships to pass through each year. This achievement bolstered the U.S. economy, solidified its status as a global engineering and technological powerhouse, and expanded its military influence throughout the 20th century and beyond. Following its completion, the Panama Canal remained under American control, which led to ongoing tensions between the U.S. and Panamanians, who sought to reclaim sovereignty over the canal on their own land. These tensions were exacerbated by the Americans' treatment of Panamanian workers and disputes over flying the Panamanian flag alongside the U.S. flag in the canal zone. As a result, relations between the U.S. and Panama began to deteriorate sharply, with growing protests against American control of the canal. Panamanians were further inspired by Egyptian President Gamal Abdel Nasser's nationalization of the Suez Canal in 1956, which wrested control away from the British and French in what became known internationally as the Suez Crisis. In January 1964, massive anti-American violence erupted in the canal zone, leading to the deaths of 28 Panamanians. This sparked international outrage and pressured the U.S. to reconsider its stance on canal governance. In response, in 1977, U.S. President Jimmy Carter and Panamanian leader Omar Torrijos signed the Torrijos-Carter Treaties. These agreements laid the groundwork for a gradual transfer of control of the canal from the United States to Panama. The first treaty, known as the Treaty of Permanent Neutrality, states that the United States has the right to use its military to permanently defend the canal and ensure freedom of navigation. Pay attention, folks. This means the United States, under these treaties, can deploy its military to the canal if it faces threats like closure or endangerment. The second treaty is the Panama Canal Treaty, which stipulates the end of U.S. presence in the canal zone and the full transfer of the canal to Panama in December 1999. Many Americans opposed President Carter's plan to hand over the Panama Canal to the Panamanians. For example, then presidential candidate Ronald Reagan declared in a 1976 speech that the people of the United States were the rightful owners of the Panama Canal Zone. Ultimately, on the agreed date in December 1999, during the administration of President Bill Clinton, the Panama Canal was fully handed over to the Panamanian government. Since then, it has been managed and operated by the Panama Canal Authority. This is why former President Trump criticized Carter, claiming he foolishly gave up the Panama Canal. The Panama Canal is an engineering marvel operating through a system of locks. This distinguishes it from the Suez Canal, where water flows naturally and remains at a constant level. you must watch the very important episode we created about the Panama Canal, where we explained its unique lock system, its global trade significance, and how it has been impacted by climate change-induced droughts. Now, pay close attention to what follows. Over the past 20 years, two major events have significantly impacted the canal, leading to increased tolls. Between 2006 and 2016, Panama undertook an expansion project to accommodate modern, larger ships. This project cost over $5.2 billion. Severe droughts have hit the region around the canal in recent years, particularly by late 2023 due to global warming. These droughts have lowered water levels and dried up key reservoirs, impairing the canal's ability to operate effectively. As a result, the Panama Canal Authority began imposing traffic restrictions and higher tolls for transit. By late 2023, only 22 ships were passing through daily compared to the usual 36. This forced many ships to wait in queues for weeks unless they paid around $4 million to bypass the delays. Some ships had no choice but to pay, especially those carrying perishable goods. Despite the continuous rise in canal tolls, the Panama Canal Authority announced further fee hikes starting January 1, 2025. These recent toll increases appear to be a key factor in former President Trump's conflict with Panama. This is why he launched the rhetorical threats we discussed earlier in the episode. Trump essentially issued an ultimatum. Either Panama reduces canal tolls for U.S. ships and grants the U.S. additional privileges, as he believes America generously handed over the canal for free, or the U.S. will take back the canal by force. Some might ask, is this really worth all the fuss? Why would the leader of the world's largest economic and military power care so much about some canal tolls? The truth is, Trump isn't just viewing the issue through that lens. However, it's important to note that the United States is the primary user of the Panama Canal. About 74% of all ships passing through the canal are headed to or from the U.S., with China being the second largest user at 21%. Beyond the importance of the Panama Canal to the United States in terms of trade, it holds equal significance in the event of a military conflict with China, for instance. This is because the U.S. would have an urgent need to quickly transport American ships and military equipment to conflict zones. Notably, Trump's aggressive campaign against the Panama Canal and the Panamanians, due to the high transit fees, prompted Panamanian President Laurentino Cortizo to respond to Trump's complaints. He explained that the fees imposed on vessels passing through the canal are determined by experts who take into account operational costs and supply and demand factors. These fees, he emphasized, are not arbitrarily set. He also noted that Panama has expanded the canal over the years to accommodate increased maritime traffic, investing billions of dollars, and that the raised fees help cover the costs of these improvements. Cortizo went further to challenge Trump, stating that while Panamanians may have differing views on many issues, when it comes to the Panama Canal and Panamanian sovereignty over it, they all unite under the Panamanian flag. Trump did not limit his threats to the issue of high fees imposed on American ships. He also invoked the familiar Western scare tactic involving China. At every opportunity, he pointed to China's alleged control over the Panama Canal and its expanding influence in the region, asserting that he would not allow this, as we mentioned at the start of this episode. But on what basis does Trump make these claims, and what does China have to do with the matter? Panama-China relations have significantly developed over the past few years, particularly since 2017, when Panama severed official ties with Taiwan, acknowledged by China as part of its territory. This marked an implicit recognition of Taiwan as a part of China. Since then, relations between China and Panama have flourished, with China injecting massive investments into Panama. This has led some, including Trump, to view China's influence as growing in the region surrounding the canal. In reality, China's influence is expanding across countries that can be described as the U.S.'s backyard from Mexico, through Latin American countries, and into South America. It seems as though China is encircling the United States from the south, to the point where China has replaced the US as the dominant trading partner in Latin America. This is a highly significant and alarming topic that warrants an episode of its own. So if you'd like us to dedicate an episode to discussing China's growing economic and trade influence in Latin American countries, why Americans are shocked by China's rapid advance there, and what exactly is happening, let me know in the comments. Returning to China's influence in Panama, despite Trump's claims that China manages the Panama Canal, the reality suggests otherwise. This was affirmed by the Panamanian president, who stated that anyone in the world is free to visit the canal and see for themselves. He stressed that there is not a single Chinese soldier stationed there and confirmed that relations with China are respectful and well managed to ensure the interests of both countries. So what does Trump mean when he repeatedly mentions Chinese soldiers? Most likely, he is referring to the Chinese company managing 2 of the 5 ports adjacent to the canal. For those unfamiliar, the Chinese company, CK Hutchison Holdings, headquartered in Hong Kong, has long managed 2 canal ports located at the canal's entrances, one on the Caribbean side and the other on the Pacific side. But does Trump even have the capability to reclaim the Panama Canal? Legally speaking, according to treaties signed between the 2 countries in 1977, specifically the Neutrality Treaty, the U.S. retains the right to intervene if the operation of the canal is threatened due to military conflict. However, under normal circumstances, there is no legal avenue for reclaiming the canal. Thus, the only practical option for Trump would be a second military invasion in the history of the 2 countries. If he is genuinely serious about his threats and not merely pressuring the Panamanian government for concessions, primarily preferential treatment for the U.S. regarding transit fees. Why do I say a second time? Because the United States previously invaded Panama in 1989 to oust the Panamanian dictator Manuel Noriega as part of the war on drugs. All right, that's all well and good. How can the Suez Canal benefit from all of this? The truth is, if Trump follows through with his threats and starts clashing with the Panamanians, it will create tension and conflict that could have unpredictable global consequences. However, one thing is certain. Global shipping companies will likely be forced to reroute from the Panama Canal and look for alternative paths until the unrest and uncertainty settle down. In this scenario, the Suez Canal would become the closest and most viable option for some shipping companies. On the other hand, if Trump manages to pressure the Panamanians into reducing transit fees for the Panama Canal, this would not be in the Suez Canal's favor. The Panama Canal would become more attractive to global shipping companies, especially those dealing with U.S. ports, due to the enforced fee reductions. I don't want to drag this on too long. So, here's my question for you. This is Trump's second presidential term. He has nothing to lose. He has overcome his domestic challenges that previously constrained him. He's a nationalist who dreams of U.S. dominance over the world and wants to exploit America's economic, trade, and military power to secure gains from allies before adversaries. Do you think Trump will actually invade Panama and seize control of the canal? Or is he merely pressuring the Panamanian government to lower transit fees for American ships? I'll follow all your answers in the comments. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Most importantly, tell your friends and loved ones about us. Maybe they'll find it useful. See you